Okay, right, in this section I want to talk about some of the components or some of the elements we need to think about when we're actually trying to make an effective marketing campaign. So irrespective of whether you're engaged in entrepreneurial marketing or marketing for a standard type business, there are certain key marketing activities that we need to think about and consider. And so what we're going to talk about in this section is our marketing philosophy, what is our overall approach to marketing and how does that inform what we do in terms of marketing activities. We need to think about market segmentation. How are we going to break up the total market into smaller serviceable components? We need to think about some of the drivers of consumer behaviour. So what makes people behave in particular ways? Why do they purchase the types of products they do? What influences that purchase decision? And we want to talk about the marketing concept itself. So I'm just going to run through some of these key areas. So let's start with our marketing philosophy. It's really important that as marketers you do have a clear understanding of what your marketing philosophy is and what your approach to marketing might be. And if we look at the evolution of marketing, we can see that there's sort of three primary focuses or three primary philosophies that are operationalised towards marketing. The first is what's called the production-driven philosophy, and in this orientation, our focus is about the production of high-quality products. So all of our effort goes into the production process, to understanding production, and trying to make decisions that reinforce the quality of our production process. The second approach, or second philosophy, is what's called the sales-driven approach, and in the sales-driven approach, basically our premise is that all we need to do in marketing is focus on sales. How do we encourage customers to purchase the product and drive the sales volume of a product? So this sort of sales-driven approach is very much linked to the notion of market power and dominating the market by crowding out other organisations. The third approach is the consumer-driven philosophy, and the consumer-driven philosophy is really about trying to make sure that all of our marketing decisions are driven by a deep and considered understanding of the customer and what makes the customer consume or purchase their products in a particular way. And as a marketer myself, I tend to favour the consumer-driven philosophy. I think that if you adopt the consumer-driven philosophy, what you're doing is saying that all of our efforts have to really funnel down and be driven by an understanding of who our customer actually is. And I think for entrepreneurs, this approach is, again, probably the best approach to use. It certainly aligns quite well with the design thinking approach. You remember in design thinking, our purpose was to show empathy for the customer, to try and get a deep understanding of what motivates the customer and use that understanding to inform the types of marketing decisions that we make. So yeah, for me, I think that consumer-driven approach is a much better approach. A second thing we need to think about is the notion of market segmentation. So market segmentation is really about looking at a market and trying to identify what the different discrete groups of consumers are within that particular market or total product market. If we look at any market, if we look at the market for cars, what we see is that there's not just one market, but there's actually a whole range of different sub-segments of that market where people still want a car, but they want particular types of cars. So there are some people who want family cars. There's some people who want SUVs and off-road vehicles. There are some people who want small cars, and there are other people who want sports cars or luxury cars. So rather than trying to attack the entire market with one marketing strategy, what we do in segmentation is we identify the discrete groups of consumers in the market and we design a unique product for each of those segments. We design a unique marketing strategy, in fact, for each of those market segments. So again, as an entrepreneur, what you're trying to do is develop a deep understanding of what are the segments in my market and what segments are currently not being serviced particularly well. You know, where are there opportunities for me to get in and target and service those people far more effectively than they're currently experiencing. And segmentation, is bread and butter for marketers. It's something that we do all the time. And I think, again, if you can try and find new ways to segment the market, that is a way of actually being entrepreneurial. So when we look at a market, there's a number of different ways that we could segment it. We could break it up based on demographic factors. So we might use an age-based segmentation approach. So we might target young consumers under 25, midlife consumers between, say, 30 and 50, and older consumers over 55. We might segment on the basis of gender, target male consumers or female consumers. And so demographics are a quite widely used approach to segmentation, and we have to remember that demographic characteristics do tend to drive consumption behaviour. So things like our educational level, for example, informs the media we use and the products that we buy. We might use geographic segmentation. We might look at segmenting based on targeting an entire country or a particular region. We might target urban consumers or country or rural based consumers. So geography can be a powerful segmentation basis. Geography is more of or geographic segmentation is more of a pragmatic segmentation. It's not about so much the drivers as just being and saying we can't service an entire geographical region. We might look at purchasing behaviour, whether it's the current purchasing behaviour or their purchase readiness state, as a way of segmenting the market. So we might target repeat users of a product or people who are heavy users. So for example, airlines target business travellers because they're high value, because they're usually travelling for work purposes, and they travel more often than individual consumers do. We might segment in terms of the benefits sought. Again, if you think about the car industry, some consumers are just looking for a cheap, affordable car. Other people are looking for a car that links to being high status. So again, what is the benefit that's driving purchase? We might look at the product itself and the purchase conditions. We're targeting people who buy things on the weekend. Are we targeting people who buy things online? Where is the basis of people making that purchase? And we might look at the actual individual and look at their unique characteristics and think about what that might tell us about a basis of segmentation. Now, usually when we segment a market, we try and use a number of these components together. We don't just use one. We would probably describe our segment in terms of a combination of things like demographics, products, benefits sought. We also need to think a lot about the notion of consumer behaviour. And for those of you who are doing things like marketing, for example, you actually do a dedicated unit on consumer behaviour. And consumer behaviour, the study of consumer behaviour is very heavily informed by psychology and understanding the individual psychological processes that people go through when they make the decision to purchase. And so what consumer behaviour does is tell us a little bit about the decision process, what types of decision processes do people engage in, what informs that decision process and where does that information come from, and what are the sort of personal characteristics of individual consumers that are likely to influence their purchase behaviour. So again, getting a detailed understanding of your consumer and the type of behaviour they exhibit is really critical to being able to deliver a truly customer-centric, customer-focused marketing strategy. And we certainly also need to think about market research. I'm often amazed how unwilling businesses are to spend money on doing decent market research, on trying to develop a deep, rich understanding of the consumers and the issues that drive or influence consumer behaviour. And so marketing research is really designed to give us the answers we need about consumers, about market conditions, about our competitors, about likely trends and changes that are going to happen in that marketplace. And so I'm a very strong advocate for people spending time and spending money on doing research before they go to market. I would rather spend money here and find that the market is unviable than spend a lot more money in trying to start a business up and then fail. So I think if we're thinking seriously about the best way to go about engaging in business, we should very much be trying to engage in market research. And when we think about market research, we need to think about what's the purpose, what's the question we're trying to answer with our marketing research process. And we need to think about the different types of research we might take. We might use secondary research. So secondary research is when we make use of data that already exists, that's already been collected. And there's actually lots of really good secondary data that's out there available for most product categories. So you can actually find out a lot and answer a lot of questions just by looking at secondary research. In Australia, if you want to find out information about demographic characteristics of markets, one of the best things you can do is actually go to the Australian Bureau of Statistics and have a look at their data sets. Similarly, if I'm looking to do business online, I can go to Google and I can buy customer data, which is all secondary data. And then there's also what's called primary research. Primary research is when we ourselves conduct the research, and the research we conduct is driven by a specific research question that we have at a point in time. So we're seeking a direct answer to that problem. Again, as a marketer, you try and use a mix of both types of research. And the final sort of component of our marketing that we need to think about is this notion of relationship marketing. And relationship marketing has really become a dominant force in the broader marketing landscape in recent years. And relationship marketing is based on the premise that some customers represent significant high value to the organisation. And in fact, when we look at customer data, we tend to find that about 80% of our sales actually only comes from about 20% of our customers. And so what we should be trying to do is identify those customers that are of highest value to the organisation, and then see how we can actually build a relationship with those customers over time to ensure that they keep coming back and remain loyal to our organisation. So again, if you look at a company like Apple, they are really strong at the relationship marketing process. They believe in building a strong base of consumers who will continue to buy their products across a range of categories, and they focus a lot of their marketing efforts on retaining those particular customers. It does actually cost a lot of money to attract a customer to your organisation. If you think about advertising, you spend a lot on advertising and yet no one might end up buying your product. And so relationship marketing is seen as being a really important way of building that bond and keeping people loyal. Now again, for entrepreneurs, there's a really good way that you can build relationships, and that's through the use of co-design. By partnering with your customers and working with them through the product design process so that they actually have input from day one. We can also look at things like customization as a way of actually building that relationship.